Welcome to Selling in the Motor Trade, in association with Automotive Management and Simco Training. This is the weekly podcast where we share best practice, tips, and ideas on how to sell more cars, improve your service department, and generally put more profit into your dealership or dealer group. I'm your host, Simon Bowkett, or some of you might already know me as Skippy. And firstly, I want to say thank you for taking the time to tune in. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Selling in the Motor Trade. Today, something a little bit different. You know that we normally interview sales directors, managing directors of dealer groups, manufacturers, and salespeople, all within the motor trade. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Matt Sykes. Now, Matt is the author of two books there, and there's a great book, Converted, How to Get People to Buy What You Want to Sell. He also has his own podcast, Sales Cadence, and is a keynote speaker. So I'm really keen to see Matt's take on selling and what he thinks of us in the motor trade. So Matt, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us.
Simon, my absolute pleasure. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, listen, Matt, to start off with, in the motor trade, sometimes we have a reputation of people falling into the motor trade. We say in tongue-in-cheek sometimes, if you can't flip the hamburger right at McDonald's, you go off and sell cars. Now, I don't subscribe to that. I think that's hard work. But tell me about yourself. How did you get involved with selling? Was that something you wanted to do when you're in school, primary school? I want to be a salesperson?
Really, it's a great question. And I think it was Brian Tracy, Simon, who was originally gifted with that quote that people don't choose a career in sales, they fall into one. And I always get a little bit flustered and wound up when I hear that, simply because I actually chose, believe it or not, sad as it sounds, I actually chose the career. And I think I chose it on 3 different occasions. But if I answer your question as succinctly as possible, I left school at 16. Mm-hmm. At this time, so this is the mid-80s, yeah? And Margaret Thatcher was the UK Prime Minister, and the philosophy in the UK at that time, Simon, was very much higher education is okay for those that can afford it, but we really want people to get out of school and get into work. And so the mantra was go out and find a job, earn some money, buy a house, which is great. And I love that. And I think there perhaps should be a bit more of that these days. Hey, that's just my opinion. So the very first job that I went out and got was working in a shoe shop. So I'm going to say to you, I actually went out and searched out a sales job. There may have been others that I went for that I can't remember, but it just so happened I got the job working in the shoe shop. So for me, the very first thing that happened at age 16 was I started to flog shoes for a living.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is a shameless plug for our book and our sales programs are there. We talk about one of our programs is the first 90-day program. And we always say the skills and techniques you learn in the first 3 months of your career last for the rest of your life, good and bad. So taking back to that first job, selling shoes, is there anything that you learnt back then that is as relevant today as it was when you started?
Yes. So let me give you a bit more meat on the bones. So I turned up for work, age 16, first day, and the store manager, I actually call him a different name in the book because I'm not allowed to call him by his real name. Okay. I'm going to call him by his real name on here, Simon. Mr. Barnett was his name. He's a Scouser, a lovely guy. And when I met him on the first day at work, he said to me, listen, Matt, you're here to sell shoes, obviously, but I don't need you to sell shoes because when people walk in the store, they've already decided they want to buy them. Very similar to the world that you work in, right? When people come into a car showroom, they've already made that emotional connection with the car that they want to buy. There's some work to be done. Yep. And that's where the guys and the girls who listen to this podcast get involved. But he said, so I don't need to sell shoes. I need to sell something different. I need to sell shoe trees. And for most people who are familiar with shoe trees, those are the things that you put in your shoe to keep them in great condition. And the first week was an absolute car crash, mate. I asked everybody who came in the store within an inch of the till, do you want to buy a pair of shoe trees? Can I introduce you to a pair of shoe trees? Have you got a pair of shoe trees? You haven't. Would you like to buy a pair? You don't. And the whole of that first week, mate, was a complete and utter disaster because everybody said no to me. So there are a number of things I learned in that first week. And the first thing I learned was that people say no quite a lot. And actually, that happens for a reason. And 99 times out of 100, they normally say no because it's my fault, not theirs. At 3 o'clock on Friday, so the 5th day, Mr. Barnett came downstairs from his office and said, so Matt, how did it go? And I said, boss, it was hopeless. I must have asked 250 people and no one bought. And he looked at me and he smiled. Now, and I always, whenever I tell this story, Simon, I always try and reference it. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the movie, the original one with
Yes.
Gene Wilder, right?
Yep.
You remember when Charlie and Grandpa Joe go back into his office at the end of the movie to hand back the everlasting gobstopper?
Yes.
And Gene Wilder puts down his quill and he starts smiling and he looks at Charlie and he goes, "You won, you won." I kid you not, my friend. That is exactly what Mr. Barnett did with me. He said, "You've won, you've won." And I was a bit freaked out by it. I said, "Well, I don't understand what you mean." He said, "Well, you've won the most important thing there is to learn in the world of selling." He said, "People buy for their reasons, not yours." So in answer to your question, there are a number of golden tickets, golden rules that you and I know to be true, and the listeners know to be true in the sales industry. And one of those golden rules is people buy for their reasons, not yours. And I spent that first week trying to sell my reason on people who didn't want what I tried to push. And it's not until I learned that first lesson, and then a few years later in life when I returned back into the sales industry, that it started to work for me. So yeah, there are a number of other things I'll bore you with a little bit later perhaps, but that first one was so important. People buy for their reasons. And I meet it, I train salespeople for a living like you do, and I still meet so many people who get it around the wrong way. They try and sell their stuff before they've realized actually it's the other person that's important in this exchange and not me.
Yeah, it's interesting you start in that retail space because you're right. In the motor industry, people do so much research before they come in. I think the latest figure I've seen was 19 hours and 42 minutes of research. And so often we find that the customers know they want that Audi, the Q5, the S-Line model, but it's where they're going to buy it from. And we find there's the competition. The biggest competition Audi has is not Mercedes. It's not that other brand. It's that other Audi dealer. So it's this race to the bottom is something we're always asked to combat. From your views, I'd like to get your views on how do you stop the race to the bottom in selling? What do you do to try and combat that?
Well, when you talk about race to the bottom, Simon, I'm going to kind of assume you're talking about price.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah.
So the difference between perhaps most of your audience and me is I sell in the B2B space. Mm-hmm. Okay, whereas I guess a lot of people who listen to this are in the B2C space. Very, very challenging in your industry. Go back to your point you just made there, which is a great point, which is so much research is done. I didn't know the hours and minutes. There is a quotation which continues to go around the circuit, came out in 2015, I think, from Sirius Solutions, that 67% of the sale has already been done digitally before they get anywhere near you. So that percentage in your hours will probably match up, right?
Yeah.
And we can agree with that. We can, whether it's 67 or 60 or 70, who cares? But because of your point, there is so much information out there. I mean, crikey, I can go onto a Ford website now and configure my own car, right? I can pick the color. I can pick all the optional extras. I would imagine I can go and work out what finance deal. I can do anything I want from behind my desk. And so the challenge therefore is, how do we infiltrate that 67%? What makes my Audi dealership any different to the Audi dealership down the road? And I think that's one of the areas where, in my world in B2B, it's probably slightly easier for a salesperson because that they don't tend to have that restriction on price in the way that people who sell into the B2C space probably do, right? If you're going straight to a customer, the customer is going to want to know what the cash number is. Mm-hmm. In my world, whilst we still have an issue with price because it's a factor, I'd like to think, Simon, it's not the factor, right? I spent 16 years in the corporate world selling packaging, and every buyer I ever drum up a really good relationship with at that time would always admit to me over a cold beer in the bar at night time that price was never the main driver for the purchase. It was always quality and service first, because what's the point of a cheap thing that doesn't work or fails, right? So how do you stop that race to the bottom? You move the conversation as far away from price as possible, or more importantly, you move the conversation as far away from price until it's relevant. Okay. Most salespeople will come under pressure early on in the conversation when someone says, "This all sounds great, Matt, but how much does it cost?" If you haven't already reassured your buyer that what they're about to spend their money either doubles or trebles their return on their investment back, you're always going to get a challenge when you start to talk about the cost of the product. Because there is a difference, as we know, between the price of something and the cost of something.
Yes.
So without trying to con or fool a buyer, there is a right time to insert in the B2B world the conversation about price. And it tends to happen towards the end of the sales process and not near the start. And that's the disadvantage your guys have, because people have already worked out and looked on the website, they can see it's £16,995.
Yeah, you're right. But we believe in our world, there's 3 sales in any sale. And we always preach, you got to sell yourself first, the product second, and then the numbers, the deal. And so often, there's so many similarities. I think it's the same thing. You still got to sell yourself first,
Yep.
the product second, before you get into the numbers. If we just go into the numbers, it is the race to the bottom. Because you know what? People still buy people. In the corporate world, the retail world there, I think that still happens.
Yeah, 100%. 100% agree with you. And again, if we go back to that serious solutions, 67%,
Yeah.
how much of that 67% can I go and infiltrate and own and start to become, I quote Daniel Priestley a lot because I really enjoy the work that he does and the books that he writes, but he talks about how you become a key person of influence. And I don't care if you sell cars or sales training or widgets or microscopes. If you want to, and if you've got a desire to be really, really successful in your marketplace, my advice to anybody in the world of sales is go and divert some of your hours in a week to becoming that person of influence, where you get on your customer's radar earlier than perhaps your competitor is doing. And there's a lot of obviously you need a strategy for doing that, but there's no excuse for not.
There's so many things, Matt. Again, it's exactly the same thing, because I think a car salesperson has to understand that they've got a business within a business. They are selling themselves their own business. And it reminds me of a lady called Elise Kephart. I met her, goodness me, must be 6-7 years ago at a conference in America. And she was selling something like 600 new Hondas a year. And very simply, she built her own YouTube channel. She'd done a video on every car that someone inquired about. She set it up to the YouTube channel because anyone who in her area was searching for a Honda in California, her video was coming up. There was hundreds of them there. And of course, customers were coming in asking for her by name. Yep. And it's just half the job's done before people turn up. And you can't tell me that she had that race to the bottom. Sure, people would have still said, come on, best price. But they already knew they wanted to buy that Honda, and probably from her as well.
Exactly. And that's how you earn the right, Simon, to become what we sometimes refer to as pre-sold.
Pre-sold. I've not heard that phrase before. What do you mean pre-sold?
A pre-sold is someone who's decided to search you out, Simon. I'm going to buy a car. I'm going to buy it. Your point exactly, yeah? I'm going to buy a car. I'm going to buy it from Simon. I'm going to buy a sales training in the motor industry. I'm only going to go to one guy, and that's Simon. I want to buy sales training in the B2B industry. I'm going to go and talk to Matt.
Yeah.
And it's a question I always ask anybody who comes to me and, wants to have a conversation about whether they should or they shouldn't get involved with sales training for the sales team. One of the early questions I'm going to ask them is that one about being pre-sold. I'm going to say, so Simon, tell me what you know about sales cadence, right? And depending on what the response I get back, that's going to give me a shed load of information about where that person's head and heart is at. Because if they say nothing at all, Matt, doesn't mean to say the conversation's over. Just means to say I've got to go to work and start to reinforce the reason why they've bothered to show up. If they say, I don't know anything about sales cadence at all, but I know a guy called Simon Bowkett, he says, whatever Matt charges, go and buy from him because he'll triple your money. Mm-hmm. Totally different conversation. Yeah. Right? And that ability to be pre-sold comes off the fact that you earn the right, whether it's like the lady you suggested who's created this YouTube channel for herself, whether you're sending out regular information on some of the social media things like LinkedIn, whether you're doing a podcast like this, whether you're just sending your customers regular updates. We're getting close to that dangerous conversation that you and I are going to have about some of the challenges that I've faced whenever I've tried to buy a car. Just keep in contact with your customer. Periodically. It's not rocket science. It's been going on forever. It staggers me that people still don't do it.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, early on in your career, just to change it up a bit, I want to talk about our influences. When I started, I had a set of cassette tapes, and that's how old I am. You remember our cassette tapes,
Yeah, yeah,
but it was Zig Ziglar tapes,
yeah,
and I love that. And after that was Ogmandino stuff, and there was
yeah.
some of the old people who, Zig's no longer with us. And I just want to get your views on who were some of your influences. You mentioned a man called Daniel Priestley as well. Who were some of your influences? And then I'm going to get your views on some of the modern influences out there that some of the young people we're training, they've heard of there. So, firstly, your influences early on?
Yeah, so this might surprise you a little bit, Simon, but I didn't really get into uh, that sort of learning and development world and the past influences until quite recently, probably about 10 years ago.
Mm,
So, one of the frustrations that forced me to leave the corporate world when I left in 2014 was I knew I had some internal sort of latent talent.
mm,
But Christ, I couldn't get it out there because, as hard as I tried to get some training from my organization, they would always push back. So it wasn't until I left in 2014 that I started to go to town on some of the things I was really enjoying doing. A few years prior to 2014, I got involved with personal development. I'd had some training. The guy who trained me introduced me to people like Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar you
okay.
talked about. Um, I would class those guys probably as the early ones.
Hmm.
Jim Rohn as well.
Yeah.
Tony Robbins, because I was very big in the personal development space, so I liked a lot of the Tony Robbins stuff. Not so sure I'm as keen on Tony now as I was then. But
That's
in those
interesting.
days, it was those
Yeah.
guys really, yeah. But here's a really weird one for you. So 2014, which is only what 6 years ago, I found Grant Cardone, believe it or not.
Okay. Yeah.
And of course, when you're new to all of this stuff, you think, well, he's great, yeah.
Yes, you do.
And then, of course, you learn a little bit more and you understand a little bit more how it works. And you start to, well, that's the same message he's been saying the last few weeks and the last few months and the last few years. And you think, well, it's just the same stuff. And so it was really interesting that I sort of came across people like, we talk about early, and then a little more latter. So I came across people like him. And yeah, and there's a few other people knocking around in that industry as well that perhaps aren't quite as savory. But yeah, certainly the early ones would be Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, people like that.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Grant Cardone, and there's another name that keeps popping up all the time. We get so many young salespeople, they'll watch a movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, and think, yes, I want to be that person there. That's sensational. And I find myself screaming. Now, don't get it wrong. I'm sure he's got a lot of good sales techniques and ideas, but I sort of struggle. I want to get your views on this, that he made his money out of ripping people off. Um, I'm getting lots of salespeople say, all right, I want to be him. And I say, but hold on, this is in a different world. Okay. He was selling, from what I understand, stocks in companies that weren't the best, penny stocks.
Yep.
Had, what was it, 3 million people in America, something like that. If they burnt someone, it didn't matter. They went on to the next, went on to the next. And I get car salespeople saying, well, hold on, think about the market you're in. If you're selling Audi in the Norfolk region, you upset that person, you're not just upsetting that one person,
Yep.
you're upsetting everyone in that area with social media.
Yep.
Is there a place for that type of selling anymore, in your opinion?
No, I don't think so. I think, you think about Jordan Belfort, you're talking about there, Grant Cardone, they've all got a place because there will always be the new generation of newbies who have got no idea what selling is, are attracted to, 1.5 million followers on YouTube, fantastic audio and visual production,
Hmm.
and actually easy to consume and fall down the rabbit hole. So I can understand how people would get seduced by that kind of stuff. Um, I think two ways to answer the question. Do I think there's a place for it? There has to be a place for it. I think anywhere where you can go and learn some stuff, whether it's ideally good for you,
Hmm.
it's got to be a good thing. You can also learn some stuff that's not very good for you.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes if you put some of that into practice, you get burned. At least you learn not to do that again. But I absolutely think there's a place for it. It's just how do you find the ones that probably are a more credible source of information from those that perhaps aren't. But for me, I just think that we are in times now, Simon, where if you are not involved in some capacity with promoting yourself and your product and your organization and your brand, if you're not doing that digitally online through LinkedIn or the other social mediums, I actually think the days of it being an option are now gone. You actually need to be involved as part of your role as a sales professional. If you are not leveraging LinkedIn, certainly from the B2B space, if you're not leveraging that, I think you are not just missing out. I think that's fundamentally the wrong way to be from a salesperson's perspective. Simply, I go right back to the 67%.
Yeah.
That's your opportunity to go and help and shape people. So there is a place for it. There is some good and some bad. Part of the fun, I guess, is learning both and deciding which one works for you.
Yeah, that's true. And I think in your space as well, we would always say anyone can sell one car. You don't want to do that. You want to sell the next car, and family and friends' cars. I imagine in your world, it's very similar because in the business to business or business to corporate world, you don't want to sell one training course. I'm sure you want to sell them the next course, and get them coming back and buying again and again.
100%. Yeah, and of course, all the spin-offs that come with that, which we know, which is introductions, referrals, case studies, that comes from satisfied customers who, of course, then repeat and go again. So, yeah, I'd like to think that most of my 2021 budget is already set with customers who I've trained this year who want to go again next year. It'll be the same for you.
Yeah, it's just, if you provide a return on investment, people invest with you. It's quite funny because whilst we train in the retail world in the motor trade, I suppose my business is very similar to what you're doing. And what we do is we need to show that return on investment to any client that's working with us. If we don't, they don't work with us again and again.
But do you have the same philosophy about using and leveraging the digital assets that are out there?
Yeah, LinkedIn has been great for us. For our new business, I imagine most of our new business comes through LinkedIn. People see videos and stuff like that, and they want to just connect. And it's very simple for me. I ask, hey, listen, what was about my profile that inspired you to connect? Matt, they're always telling me there was some video they've seen, there's some recommendation, there's something from somewhere, or they're a recruitment company, okay? But,
That first example is you being pre-sold,
yeah? Yeah, exactly. Pre-sold, and then that's where we're doing. But again, the other thing is this might be old school, but most of our business is word of mouth. We still have clients now we work with when we started in 2000. And that's where if you can actually give the return on the investment and solve the problem the client's trying to solve, that's what we need to do.
Yeah, that's brilliant to hear that in terms of longevity. So 20 odd years now, you've been winning business through word of mouth. That's just, because let's be honest about it, prospecting no one enjoys doing. Yeah, it can be a real challenge. I mean, I do it every single day. Ideally, I try and do an hour a day. Normally, it never gets to an hour. I always start, and after about 20 minutes, something will happen. The phone will ring, and before you know it, I'm gone. But in my diary, every day, 5 days a week, is prospecting.
Yep.
If you can get to a space where you don't need to, and the pipeline is continuously being filled up, you've cracked it.
Well, Matt, that's something that is so similar to the modern motor industry. And that's something you may not realize not being in the industry, but people do walk in, people do email in. That's what normally happens, or phone in nowadays. But you know what? The modern car salesperson, the people listen to this, so many times they're on the phone prospecting. So much of a modern car salesperson's job is speaking to people about their current vehicle and sell them into a new vehicle and talking about what their payments are going to be new time. It's all dragging people into the business. And that definitely came out when this pandemic. At the start of the pandemic, all the motor trade, they stopped. But when the doors opened, used cars were flying. There's probably about 4 to 1 at the inquiry level of used cars to new vehicles. And that's because there's that pent up demand. People didn't want to get on public transport. But also there's something else. It proved to me anyway that new car market, we as the car dealer, the salesperson, sales manager, it's so much hitting those phones, speaking to the service department, talking to the customer about their car, seeing if we could buy their car back off them, see if we can get them into a new car, keep their monthly outgoings there or thereabouts where they are at the moment. That's what the real professional car salesperson do. There's a saying, it may have been Zig Ziglar, possibly, not sure. You can come to work to wait, or you can come to work and fill up that pipeline. So it's quite funny. So many things that you do and the retail car salesperson does, it's the same thing.
I
It's
don't think, yeah, and I would say as well, Simon, I mean, selling hasn't changed for 200 years, right?
yep, yep,
And it won't change for the next 200 years. So all there is subtle nuances, different color lipstick, it's the same thing. It's the
yes.
same thing, yeah. So whether it's B2C or B2B, it's going to be very similar. Just some subtle changes, that sort of.
I just want to get your views on that prospect then in your world. So, business to, and I always say there's business to business,
Yeah,
there's business to the customer, but
yeah,
there's business to corporates. So that you've got B2B is, I imagine our friend Daniel Priestley, he's in that space lots. The smaller owner driver businesses they're selling to. Then you have the business to corporate. So we would be selling to Toyota Corporation, for example, and so forth. So there is definitely those, for me, those three different distinctions.
mm,
So I just want to ask, in your world though, on prospecting,
yeah.
uh, are you a fan of the email out, the doing the letter, or is it straight to the phone? What is your view on that?
It's interesting. There was a poll on LinkedIn over the weekend I saw. I took a snapshot of it and stuck it on my Facebook group page because I think there were about 270 votes. That was all.
Hmm.
But it was phone, email, text, or other, and everyone voted. And of those 200 odd votes, 77% of people, when asked the question, which of these is your main primary driver for creating sales, 77% said the phone, and I
Wow.
100% agree with that. Okay, I think people who reach out using email before they pick the phone up are are playing into the hands of risk. What do
Mm.
we know about email, Simon? We know that first of all, everybody's email is full, right? I remember seeing some stats that only 19% of of all emails get opened, right? And if I look at my own email inbox, it's full of unopened emails. If you want to really make sure that someone engages with you, then I can't think of anything more suitable for doing that than having a conversation like we're having right now.
Hmm.
And really, that means the phone has got to be the main driver. So for me, number one, always the phone.
Hmm.
What that allows me then to do is if I get through to a voicemail, and again, there's quite high statistics on the number of calls that will end up in a voicemail. So make sure you've got a great voicemail. What that allows you to do then is in the voicemail, perhaps, and I'm going to send you an email to confirm that, or to send you that information, or to share something with you, or get on your radar, whatever it is. So I'm also a big fan of doubling up.
Hmm.
But phone and email could be a good combination. Text and phone is always a good combination. But I think the phone is so important.
Yeah, I find lots of people confuse marketing to selling. And we find lots of people get very, very busy doing emails and campaigns and sending out all this. But you know, it's putting off the inevitable.
100%.
And actually, I'm just a fan of go straight to the phone, deal with the phone. Yes, you're going to getting through to the right person on the phone. That's the challenge. Getting through the gatekeeper. That's the challenge. But when you get through to the right person, it's just so much easier. Um,
It's a great point, and I think there are a number of things around that as well which challenges people. I think mindset is really important at the start of any if you're reasonably new to sales, there's always going to be some anxiety or apprehension when it comes to picking up the phone. If you're a seasoned pro, and the guys and girls that you work with who've been in the motor trade for a long time will have no problem picking up the phone and dialing out. But if you're new, then there's got to be an element of apprehension there, and I think
yeah.
that sort of addressing some of those mindset issues is really quite crucial. The thing isn't going to bite you when you pick it up. Yeah, you're going to get some no's, so let's just get that out in the open already.
Yep.
But actually, you can mitigate your chances of getting no's if you know how to speak to people down the telephone. So I remember someone asked me a question a few years ago and saying, Matt, how many objections do you get? And I thought to myself, that's a great question. I wonder how many objections I get. I could probably only ever get one proper objection. And it always tends to be about price, right? Now, we both know that we create objections as salespeople rather than the buyer who comes to us. I happen to believe, and I wrote about this in my book, that I think every buyer comes to the conversation with a set of objections.
Hmm.
And our role is to create an environment where it's okay to take those objections out, look at them, explore them, and then hopefully allow the buyer to either throw them away because they don't need them, or put them away for another day because at the moment they're not quite relevant. But being able to pick up the phone and being able to speak down the phone correctly, I think it's a combination of mindset and having the right skill. I still can't think of anything better than the telephone.
Yeah, the phone just gets so heavy. You hit the nail on the head, the new people there. And I know I've been there myself. If I'm honest, I'm still there. The phone gets heavy before I pick it up. I have to just go through that pain barrier and get there. And I don't know if that ever goes away for some people. Some people, I'm sure it does. But I just know you have to go through that pain barrier. I love your thought of, hey, you're going to get some no's. Okay, just be prepared for it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, detach yourself from the outcome. It's a mindset thing. Yeah. It always fascinates me. You can't lose what you haven't won. You haven't got. If you haven't got it, you can't lose it. So just pick the phone up and ask. And if you are really passionate about the product that you sell, and by the way, Simon, you need to be.
Yeah.
Right. One of the great things that we have in our industry as salespeople, as professional salespeople, is if we're any good, we get to choose what we sell and who we work for. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you have to earn that right. But if you're any good, you can pretty much walk into any business and you can start working for them. If you really are passionate about the product or the service that you sell, or the brand that you represent, the organization, if you genuinely believe that it helps people solve problems, and if it creates for them a significantly greater return on their investment they give to you, then it's your duty then to pick the phone up and start ringing out and talking to people. And really the mindset is, look, I've got a really great thing going on here. I'm just calling to find out if you should be on this list or not. And okay, it's not quite as simple as that. It's not too far away. You know, if you're passionate about what you sell and you know it can help someone, why on earth wouldn't you be running down the street shouting about it?
Yeah, I love that. Matt, I did reading your book. I understand you're selling paint tins to start with, or well, shoes, obviously, I've heard now, but also paint tins were very, very early on in your career there.
Yeah.
I just want to get your view on the mindset then when the world went to plastic paint tins. You know, all the tins come in plastic tins now, so the actual metal tin. There must have been a situation there where you had to really work on your mindset when you had that product that probably wasn't cutting edge. It wasn't what everyone was looking for. How did that affect your mindset in that era?
That's a great question. And do you know what? The sad thing is, and I'm going to give you my honest answer, it didn't. Because I was one of those people, Simon, who worked in a very comfortable organization, was paid good money. I had a boss who took all the heat.
Mm-hmm.
I was just part of the rank and file. I probably, and I see this quite a lot with some of the organizations that I work with, not through choice. It just seems to be that that's where they are. They sort of lack that responsibility. When things don't start to go right, they tend to shift away from the responsibility, owning the responsibility of solving it. And they're busy looking around, pointing at who's going to fix it, because I'm not paid the big bucks, he or she is. So let's hear what they've got to say. So at that time, yeah, I got into the industry when 80% of the paint that you saw on the sheds, the DIY retailers, was in metal.
Yep.
When I left in 2014, 20% was metal. And all of that 16 years working in that industry, other than the first year, was all about how do we stop losing business, right? And this is the other great thing about the world I live in now. I was so far away from knowing how to sell in those days, because all I did was turn up to a buyer and try and defend my business. And all of the training I had over 16 years, and we had a lot of training, but it was all on one subject matter, and that was negotiation, right? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with negotiation, right? It's a fundamental part and parcel of what you and your guys and girls that you help do for a living. I get that. But in my world, negotiation is the last resort, right? Because I think that in most cases you can sell effectively to avoid a negotiation. And all I learned for 16 years was how to negotiate. And it wasn't until I became a European sales director those last 5 years that then all of a sudden responsibility clicked in. So to answer your question, I apologize in a very long-winded way. It wasn't until the last 5 years of that time when I worked in there that the responsibility started to kick in, and I felt really frustrated. But of course, at that point, we'd lost pretty much everything. And then it was about, what do we do? How do we go and how do we find ways of innovating a metal can so it could compete against plastic? And so the mindset thing didn't really affect me. And it wasn't until I left corporate and started working for myself and started knocking on people's doors saying, do you want to buy some training, and getting no's, I suddenly realized, crikey, that one training session that I went on in 1998, 3-day TAC training,
Yes.
right, was the only sales training I had in 16 years. Christ, I need to go back to sales school. And I spent the first sort of 6 months in, early self-employment, just reminding myself of what you and I now do for a living in a heart.
Yeah.
You just see so many people in the B2B world who don't get trained effectively, that sadly find themselves in a situation because they're probably not able to sell the value. They end up, back to the conversation we had right at the start of the podcast, Simon, they're in that race to the bottom where the conversation is all about price.
Yep.
Right.
Well,
and then it's a difficult mindset for sure.
I just thought that paint tins was a good analogy. You and I know that our job as selling people is find out what the problem is and offer the solution. And I can't remember who it was, maybe you'll help me, but in a book I read early on in my life said, all the railway companies back in the turn of the century in America, they didn't realize, they thought they were in the railway business. They didn't realize they were in the transportation business. If they understood they were in the transportation business, they'd be running airlines now. But they're not. They stuck there. And I just thought, when you're talking about the paint tins, your company you're working with, were they actually in the, how do you actually contain paint? How do you carry paint from one place to the other? Or were they in the metal tin business?
We were very much in the commodity that we'd created for ourselves. That's exactly what we'd done. We had year-on-year growth. And then plastic comes along. We hadn't seen that trend. So there's the first problem. We were then given the opportunity to react to the trend. I can remember in 1999, my boss saying to me, "You'll never believe this." He said, and this is one of the really big customers we had then, Simon, said, "You're never going to believe this, but one of the buyers wants us to make a metal can that looks like it's made out of plastic, because they're starting to get some pressure from marketing that they want to move to plastic. And he wants us to make a can that got a white top, a white lid, and a white bottom, so you couldn't tell the difference." I laughed at him. I thought, that's interesting, boss. And then, of course, you know what happened next week? We just decimated the marketplace. So again, we'd fallen victim of not seeing the trends, not reacting when given the opportunity, and then we found ourselves in a commodity environment. And I tell you what, when you are in that commodity space, when all you're selling is paint cans, not a mechanism for getting paint from a paint manufacturer onto Simon's wall, then you're screwed. Because then it's all about price. And there will always be someone who's willing to undercut you.
Yeah, I love that phrase. It's the commodity market. I've not heard it mentioned that way before, but that's exactly the danger that happens in the motor trade. We become a commodity. And that's it. So with this in mind, the world is definitely changing. You can go and purchase your Peugeot online now from start to finish. There's a great interview we had with David Peel, the managing director from Peugeot. You can go online, you can order your vehicle, you can get a part exchange price. It's complete end to end. I think he calls it mouse to house. However, nice phrase, isn't it? Mouse to house.
I like it.
Yeah, I do. However, he's the first to admit that still a lot of people want to touch and feel it. So here's my question. Is there a space for salespeople in the future? I believe there is, otherwise we wouldn't do what we did, but I want to get your views on it. Salespeople, are we going to be around in 50 years' time, 100 years' time, or will we all just be the computer program?
I'll tell you what won't be around in 5 years' time is order takers. Those people, like I used to be when I was in corporate, who just waited for an order to come down. In those days, there was a fax line. The days of the order taker are gone. What has accelerated that spotlight on those people who don't go out and sell has been the coronavirus pandemic. Because what we've now done is we've accelerated our ability to get inside people's houses on a screen like this. So we've fast tracked through technology. What order takers can't do, of course, now is they can't really pick the phone up and say, "Simon, I'm in your area. I think I'll just pop round and have a cup of tea with you. Is that okay?" We could get away with that pre-COVID, right? I'm not advocating that's a good thing to do. Don't get me wrong. It's a horrendous thing to do, but there are people that will do that. You can't do that now on Zoom. You can't pick up the phone and say, "Simon, you fancy having a cup of tea? I'll set a Zoom call up and waste your time for half an hour." You can't do that anymore. I think order takers are significantly under pressure. People are coming back to work because the furlough payment is ending up. Organizations are looking at their bottom line and thinking to themselves, we need to make some savings. How do we make savings in our role? Okay, we've got to get rid of the people that aren't adding value. Who's not adding value? Tom, Dick, and Harry, because they're not selling. They're out there just taking orders. So I think the first problem they're going to have is that. In answer to your question, do I think salespeople are around? Hell yeah. Absolutely. And I think if you can sell for a living, I think you've got a real fantastic opportunity coming up. Because back to your point earlier, people buy people, right? Of course they buy a product and a service that goes with it, but they buy people. If I had a choice, I forget who came up with this quotation, but all things being equal, people buy products from people that they know, like, and trust. All things not being equal, people buy products from those people they know, like, and trust. And we can debate whether or not likability is that important at the start of the sales conversation when we first meet, but it sure as hell is really important once we get into a trading relationship. You know, back to your world of cars and wanting to get not just the first sale, but the next car in 3 years, the next car in 3 years, the next car in 3 years. That is all about responsibility. That is all about relationships. That's all about owning the client and having the client's best interests at heart. What qualified professional salespeople do is keep in touch with people without stalking them or bugging them. They provide them with valuable information. They give them insights into the future projection of how cars are going to grow, what's going to happen in the world of hybrids, what's going to happen with the electric situation. If I'm a consumer and I'm buying, for example, a BMW, and my salesperson who sold me my previous car sends me some regular information about what they believe the trend of the electric car versus hybrid is going to be over the next 3 years, they're going to get my attention. If they keep in contact with me and ask for some feedback on what I thought, we're going to have a conversation. If we have a conversation and they know how to sell, they're going to sell me a car, right? So I actually believe that the future is really, really bright for anybody who's got the skill and the foresight to know how to sell. The people that haven't are toast.
Matt, it's interesting. We've got a whole lot of car salespeople and managing directors and sales directors listening to this, and lots of people in the after sales world, the service side of it. But can you talk me through your experience buying a car? The good, the bad, the ugly. Come on, I know this is what you're hoping to get off your chest, maybe. Talk to us about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what have you had out there, great service, without naming and shaming or anything?
No, I'll be honest with you. And you and I had a previous conversation. You very kindly came on my podcast and we had a sort of a semi-chat about it. But first and foremost, Simon, I would say that anybody who's selling cars at the moment, I have 100% utmost respect for. It's very, very close to a paint can in my world, right? I can buy an Audi from my dealership in Norwich, in Norfolk, where I live, or I can buy the same Audi from Ipswich, which is 40 miles away. The price is the same, the color's the same, everything about the car is identical. What am I going to go with? I'm going to go with the person that looks after me the best and has earned my right to give them the cash. I think that when you go into the showroom environment, things tend to be pretty funky and good. And I think that whenever I've gone into a car showroom, I've always felt like I've been quite special, right? The problem is that special feeling stops when I leave. And I just wish, and you'll know hundreds of clients who you work with who do this brilliantly.
Matt, can I ask a question? When you leave and you've bought the car, you mean after you've actually secured the deal, or when you've gone and got the information?
No, it's not quite as succinct as that, actually, Simon. It's actually, so if I think of when I've bought cars previously, the relationship that I've had when I've actually been inside the showroom has always been exceptional. They've treated me like royalty. They've really looked after me. And I feel good about that. But when I leave, and let's say I've inquired about a car, we've gone through some numbers, we've looked at some models, maybe I've even done a test drive. When I leave there, I've never really, and it could be unique to this one dealership, I've never really felt that relationship carries on when I've left the showroom, right? I'll give you an example. I went into a local dealership literally 2 months ago. At the request of the dealer principal, who was new to the role and was keen to make sure that, what he saw, he could perhaps work on. If there were any challenges or any feedback that I thought would be helpful, that he could try and solve. So I sort of partly went in there to see him, but I also went in there because my car is, ready to be changed. It's COVID, right? So I turn up as agreed on my invitation at 11:45. I'm standing outside the door at 11:45, which by the way is shut. You can't go in for obvious reasons. I put my face mask on. I wait for 10 minutes before someone comes to the door to let me in. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not a great start. You've invited me in and you're 10 minutes late to your own meeting. Okay, well, let's ride that and move on. We go into the dealership. Bearing in mind, I've already bought one car from this dealership before. The next thing that happens for 20 minutes is they take my details and put it into their new computer system. Can you imagine how painful that is?
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, let's just look at this brand new system that we've got. It's fantastic. We're all getting to grips with it, but you know what IT's like. I'm going, okay. And then we play the let's fill your name game in, right?
Yep.
So that in itself is, I'm starting to drum my fingers on the table, and this is getting quite frustrating.
Sounds like an interrogation at this point.
It's just a colossal waste of time.
Yeah.
And any relationship that we had is slowly being burnt away. We then get to the main event and we talk about my car and what I'd like, and my aspirations to the future, and how much I'd like to pay, how much I wouldn't like to pay, what about a deposit, the usual stuff, what color. And I made it quite clear that, I'd be really interested to know if there are any approved and used models. I'm not disclaiming, I'm not suggesting I don't want a new car. I'm interested. I've never had an approved used. I said I'm going to approve used. And of course, that's the message that I left as I walk out. 24 hours later, I get the email, which is an email which shows me a brand new car, not an approved used, a brand new car. And Simon, this is a car which is 25 grand more expensive than the one I'm in currently, right? I mean, at the very least, people just need to listen. Even if you think that it's a better deal putting me into a new car than a used, and I get that from a finance perspective, because the finance deals on used at the moment are crazy brilliant, right?
Yep.
As I'm sure you know. More finance, higher percentage on an approved use. I understand that too. But if the buyer, people buy for their reasons, says, I'm interested in approved used as their primary driver, I would be stupid as a salesperson not to at least lead with used. Right?
People buy for their reasons. It's listening again, isn't it?
It's the listening. And then, you know, I don't want to, listen, I want to reinforce the point I'm saying, that everybody who works in the motor trade, I genuinely believe has got a tough job on their hands, right? Especially now. I've got a lot of time for anybody that is trying to earn a living out of selling cars. I have to say that. But please don't make it harder than it needs to be. Please do not send me a stock email and get my name wrong. Don't call me Mr. Symes. I'm calling for Sykes. You can't make it up.
Yeah.
I literally can't make it up. I'm getting my name spelled wrong. And I guess that's the frustration I have with all of this. And I don't know. And back to your question, I'll end this rant with this. Back to your question about, do you think that the salespeople are going to be around in the future? Ones that behave like that won't be, because I'm so close. We are so close to buying online now as the norm. I know you can do it anyway. Carzoo, I see the advert every night on TV. I see it advertised on Everton's football shirt. They're going places. That guy's I think it was you that was educating me on how much money he's made with that brand. He's making it really, really easy for people like me to not go into a dealership. He's making it really, really easy for me to go and buy online. Jeff Bezos at Amazon has made it really normal for me now to do all of my shopping without going anywhere near a shop. And if car dealerships can't reverse that trend, or find a way of making it so fundamentally enjoyable for me to go and spend time in there, it's going to be a really difficult future.
Yeah. Again, it's make it enjoyable. It's the experience. My wife will go out and do retail therapy when she can. It should be exciting. And buying a car, that should be right up there as one of the most exciting things you can go and do. And too often I get salespeople, I see they turn something that should be fun and exciting into a hard work thing. It sounds like it was hard work to try and buy a car there.
It was definitely hard work. You know, last little point I'd say as well, which back to another point you mentioned about race to the bottom. If you're going to send me the finance on a new car, don't send it to me. Try and get me back in. And again, this will be bread and butter for you, I'm sure. If you want me to object, get me in front of you. Don't allow me to object in my own home when I'm watching television at 7:30 or 9. I think, that's too expensive. I'm going to go somewhere else. You know, that for me is just, I don't teach anybody in my industry to send a quotation. We don't do quotations anymore. You know, all they are is just a formal indication of my stupidity if I'm willing to share my price. And if I'm willing to do my price, give my price to you when I'm not in the room with you, so that at least I can handle it, even worse. But those are some of the things that happen. And I don't know, maybe you could help me. Is there a different way of doing it, or is that the only way to do it?
No, Matt, see, 100%. You have to put the price in front of people so you see the reaction. Okay. And then it's very, very simple. You'll know this. Let's ask for the business. Let's just say, hey, Matt, did you want to do that over the 36 months, or is it more comfortable over the 48? Matt, here is the price on that used vehicle that you're looking for. It is an approved used Audi, and it comes in this. But listen, I thought I'd do you a disservice if I didn't tell you. On the PCP, the offers we got on that new Q5 is coming in at X amount. Hey, Matt, which one makes more sense?
100%. And that's exactly what I was wanting from my local dealership. And they didn't do that. They took the decision to give me a lower finance on a new car. They took away my choice to think about. And imagine if they'd have done what you just done there, and I thought, well, that bloody hell, Simon's got my back. He actually wants me to save money. I like this guy.
But also it's acknowledging what the customer wanted. There's something else you said. Customers have made their decision before they turn up so often. And they have. That is evidence. They've done so much research on what they want there. Our job is to confirm what they wanted there. And my concern with that episode, and it happens, now I'm not going to knock the salesperson at all, but it would appear he may not have listened. Now, listen, the flip side, you must have had some great service with salespeople at some point. What stands out for you? Maybe in buying holidays or I don't know, anything else that you've done. Is there any time that you've thought, wow, that's a great piece of salesmanship?
I can't think of any specific examples, but I can tell you that whenever I've been on the receiving end of what feels like, I'll give you one example. I remember a guy ringing me up trying to get me into corporate rugby tickets. And I remember putting the phone down after having the conversation with him. And I sort of had to sit back and think to myself, my God, that was good. and I put it down to one thing, Simon, really, which was diagnosis. Right? He was asking me questions which were diagnosing the situation that I found myself in. And of course, you had the usual basics, about who's got, the authority to buy and budget and all that kind of stuff that you and I know is kind of stock. But some of the questions that he was asking me, and I can't remember the exact one, just made me think like, well, I'm in control of this conversation. He's leading me. I'm sort of telling my story through my answers to his questions, and it felt good. And I think anybody who wants to give really great customer service or a really great sales experience, for me, it's all about diagnosis. I don't know what you want to buy. I've got a rough idea, but I'm going to sure as hell going to help you find out if you need it or not. And that's where I think taking people on that journey of discovery, where people can start to solve their own problems. Salespeople who are willing to ask a question and almost like a coach, not give them the answer, know what the answer is, but lead them in that direction. Actually quite cathartic being a buyer on the receiving end of that. So I can't give you a specific example, but I just know that the best experiences really are when you're allowed to self-diagnose. Yeah, I do want that. Yeah, I do want it in that color. Yeah, actually, I do want that engine size. Yeah, that feels great.
Yeah. Listen, we all here as salespeople, and you've done your job well when a customer turns around and says, Simon, I can't believe I bought a car today. I just popped out to have a look what's there. I can't believe I've gone through it. And some of the worst things is when they turn around and say, oh, you're a very good salesperson, Simon. I was thinking, no, I've got it wrong. I've got that wrong if you're saying you're a good salesperson. I love it when people say, hey, listen, I can't believe I've gone ahead with this. That's when the salesperson's done their great job in the motor trade for me.
I agree. There's a really great marketing guy that I follow quite a lot, a guy called Sean D'Souza. He's a New Zealander. He's got a fantastic podcast called The 3-Month Vacation. Well worth a listen. But most of his work is predicated on the premise that he makes it very, very difficult for people to buy from him. Okay. So if you want to buy his online training, you have to get in a queue. If you want to join his membership site, you have to pay money to get in the list to find out whether or not you qualify.
Scarcity.
There's a bit of scarcity going on for sure. But there's also again, back to diagnosis or disqualification. What he's trying to do is disqualify out all those people that won't do it. And by putting up these gates or these barriers, what you're effectively saying to the buyer is, go on, if you really want to go for it, get over that one then. Yeah. And get over the next one and do the next one. If you're willing to wait until 8 a.m. on Friday morning when the tickets go on sale, you could be at the front of the queue. Yeah. Okay. Scarcity. Those are some of the little secrets and gems I think that can work really, really well. There's a great guy on LinkedIn called Benjamin Dennehy. I don't know if you ever follow Benjamin.
Don't know him, no. Benjamin, okay.
So he's a real cold calling expert. If there's ever a guy you want to, he's rocket fuel. He's a New Zealander, so be careful.
Okay.
Excellent at what he does. Probably no one in the marketplace has or authoritative and informative as Benjamin when it comes to cold calling, but he does have a unique style.
Okay.
Very straight down the middle. But he made me laugh recently because I noticed on his website that if you want a discovery call with Benjamin, you have to pay £100. So if you just want to have a conversation with him, you have to pay some money. And he actively says there's nothing wrong with that, because 95% of people that think they want to talk to me actually don't. And all I'm doing is disqualifying them, making it easy for them not to bother. It's the 5% that pay the money that have the conversation with me that I want to speak to. Of course, he needs to get a return on their investment at the end of it, but he's comfortable enough to be able to do that.
I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I did go on the Jordan Belfort experience when it was in Manchester. I had so many salespeople say, "What's this all about?" What's quite funny is I seen a very big client of mine there as well. We looked at each other thinking, "What are we both doing here?" But hey, listen, I'm going along to rob and duplicate, see what ideas were there, and I found it was, I'm going to say it, it's sickening. He had a big audience there, and he was preying on the weak. He was selling high-end courses from some kids who just couldn't afford it. Some of the promises that he was coming up with, some of the things he's doing, it was, I felt it was like, there's another person you may have heard of, his name will come to me in a second, does the Contrapreneur. He talks about his name is?
Mike Winnick.
Thank you, Mike Winnick. And I think Mike summed up perfect. I felt like I was sitting through a Contrapreneur. And, the plants in the audience, we only have 50 spaces. We're going to teach you how to trade on the stock market. He's flying a helicopter and he's giving away water, so he's a good person. It's only 50 places. It's normally 16,000, but today only it's going to be 1997. Be quick. And again, Google is around. I Googled the person that he was trying to promote, and it's like it's got scam all over it there. And I just feel that this Contrapreneur environment there, it doesn't work in the real world of selling to the corporates. If you're selling one-off, you never see them again, fine.
No, you have to, there's no doubt about it, Simon. If you're going to sell to the big corporates, then you have to lead with absolute value. That's a word that gets banned about too much, but let's use it. Absolute value to those guys and girls. You have to go to them. I think it's, I don't know if you've ever read Eat Their Lunch by Anthony Iannarino. I talk about that book quite a lot. Mm-hmm. Eat Their Lunch is essentially a book designed to help you go and steal somebody else's business ethically. Mm-hmm. And he talks about the 4 levels of selling, or the 4 levels of value creation. Level 1 is product, but everybody's got a product. We've got a Ford. Come and buy my Ford. That doesn't work. Level 2 is service. We've got a great Ford. We get a great finance package that goes with that. We've got a wonderful service desk. We're here 24/7. You can even go online and you can book your own MOT. But of course, everybody's doing that as well. Level 3 value creation is where most people are, and I include myself to some extent in this in terms of level 3, although I'm moving to level 4 as much as I can. Level 3 really is selling outcomes. And interesting to know what it's like in the car industry. I would be surprised if people are trying to sell the aspirations of having the Maserati on the drive. That's why you want to buy a Maserati, Mr. Sykes. But that's essentially what selling outcomes are. Selling to large corporates in B2B space is selling them an outcome, which is return on their investment. Okay? And that goes through that process of diagnosis, knowing how many people in your sales team aren't performing, and what are the sorts of values that you could create for yourself if you could shift them up by 10 or 15 or 20%. And when you come to that conclusion about how much money that is, you can then realize that actually your investment that you're going to get when we get you there is significantly greater than how much it's going to cost to put them through some training. So level 3 is outcome. But where Anthony Iannarino tries to educate the reader to is level 4 value creation. And level 4 is finding yourself in a position where you become a strategic partner or a strategic advisor, whatever narrative you want to call it, where you essentially become part of their payroll without being on the payroll. You provide them with economic and financial and business information on a regular and frequent basis to allow them to say, my God, I like Simon. Every 3 months, he provides us with some more helpful information, which just allows us to make really great business decisions. It's just so pleased that we know him. And that's really where people should be aspiring to get to, is that sort of level 4 area. And that's really where, I guess, if I'm a corporate, if I'm a Nissan or I'm a Peugeot, I would want someone who's selling me sales training to come to me and actually educate me in how I can move my business in a certain direction with your help that's going to be better for me.
Yeah. Matt, thank you very much for that. It's a great insight into so many things are similar in what our worlds do. And I'm just looking at the time now. This was always going to be one where we're going to go on, and there's so much more we could actually talk about. But I just want to ask you about your book. What are some of the gems in your latest book that converted, how to get people to buy what you want to sell, if I've got that correct? What are some of the gems we got in there that we need to know about?
So Converted, How to Help More People Buy What You Sell, is a book that I wrote specifically to lay down what I believe are the 10 steps of the sales process. I'm going to say 10, of which 9 are tangible and 1 is non-tangible. And the one that's not tangible is number 1, which is resilience. Okay, so the book effectively are these 10 steps, and they are sequential. And they're no different to any sales process that everybody or anyone would use. They just happen to be the way that I do it and the way that I've done it for a long time and the way that works. So what are the gems in there? Well, I think the first one would be the first chapter, which is resilience. If there was one thing that I would love to help more people with, it's understanding the importance of this and how mindset and attitude can really help people. And I mean that genuinely really, really help people, because whether we like it or not, there's a direct link between how we think and how our life turns out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are some weird gubbins in here. I don't claim to be a psychologist and never have done, but I know enough about human psychology to know that there are parts of the way that we operate which we do just on habit. Okay, and those habits that we create for ourselves are created because we feed our habit part of our brain with certain thoughts over a frequent period of time, that it just happens to become a habit. And some of those habits can be really helpful, but some of those habits can be really unhelpful. So if there was a gem that I would try and point people to, it would be the first chapter in the book, which talks about resilience. And when we talk about things like, there's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system. And what that does is it filters out the things that we don't want to see, and it locks onto the things that we do want to see. And the example that's always used, and I'll go right back to Jim Rohn and Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar, because they used to use it in those days too. It's still relevant today. You buy a car, okay, because it's unique, and you've never seen a Mustang in orange before, ever, not driving down the streets in Norwich. And that's the reason why you bought that car. It sounds fantastic. What a throaty noise that V8 is. You love your car. It's orange. It's got black leather seats. And you drive out of the showroom, and within 15 minutes of driving out of the showroom, you see another one. And then you see another one. And before you realize it, you find another one over there. And that's what's going on with this thing called the RAS. They've always been there. They just never were on your radar because you didn't start to consciously think about them. And I think that when you start to get more of a grip about how this thing works, it helps us so much in a sales context. You think about our conversation we had earlier about the phone and cold calling. If you can get yourself prepped to a position through mindset and attitude training of how you can start to approach a phone call in a far more constructive, helpful way, I just think your results off the back end of that are just so much better. So I think in terms of a gem, resilience would be the first one. I think there's another one, another nice one in there is, and we talked about it a lot, which is chapter 6 is reassure. And reassure is back to that point we've been talking about a few times, Simon, which is return on investment. Mm-hmm. Right? If I'm going to help somebody buy what I've got, I need to reassure them that doing so is right for them, that it makes sense for them. And so much of that comes through the questions that we ask and that process of discovery and diagnosis and all the great things that we do as salespeople through asking great questions and really good, strong, active listening. So I think helping people reassure the other person that it's right to do business with them, I think is another little gem. And then probably the last chapter in the book, chapter 10, which is return. Every one of these starts with R, by the way.
Okay.
Return is the thing I think, I've given some examples and probably, not very helpful examples for the dealership that I was talking about, but I'm being honest. The final R is return. And return is so crucial because return says, okay, you've bought from me. Now I need to return back into your world and keep you. so that you do buy the second car, the third car, the fourth car. And there are so many things in that final chapter. It's just so obvious, but I just see it missing so often. Yes, keep in contact. Yeah, if it's relevant and you're in the right industry, then of course you're going to want a case study, of course, because people can reduce their risk if they see that other people have had an enjoyable experience buying from you. So why on earth wouldn't you ask people for a case study? Getting introductions to other people, it's the bread and butter of the motor industry, right? So I think that those would be the three gems that would come to mind.
There's just so many things that I started off this interview thinking our two worlds might be so poles apart. It's selling, but selling in a different world. But it's the same thing. People look at Google reviews. Google reviews are so important. How well other people have been looked after. Am I going to be looked after the same well? Customer satisfaction index scores. Following up people. You call about returns. Stay in contact with people so they come back and buy again and again and again. Matt, the last thing I want to talk about, and maybe the dealer world, it might not be for them, but maybe for our world. You get so many people that you must come up against that says, hold on, we're going to cut training and marketing when times get tough. That's something at the start of COVID-19, Simco training. We've been going for 20 years. Thank goodness we have, because hey, there were some challenges and we could have tightened our belts. Let's wait until the world starts spinning again. We had a completely different view. We said, no, now's the time to go out there and market. We launched this podcast. We spent, a lot of money on it. Speaking to a guy called Rob Lawrence, we both know, charges a fortune, I might add, but a great guy. We've actually invested lots and lots on this. And I tell you what, we've invested in training and marketing right at the time when most corporates would say, let's not do it. It makes no sense. But I say it's been one of the smartest things we've ever done. We have got more business now than we've ever seen. We've got the selling online world, our online programs. We've had to change that. We've got major manufacturers we're speaking to now. We've got dealer groups we had not been in before talking to us about what we're doing. So here's the question. How do you, I know it works. It's worked in my own business. How do you get that message into the people who are still saying, no, we're going to cut training and marketing. We're going to cut it.
Well, it's a good question, but you've already got the social proof to show them what's happening in your business. I guess, the key word that is in my world is evidence.
Yeah.
But there has to be evidence for people to feel comfortable about answering a question or taking a decision. How do you get people to do it? And so I think for me, first of all, I would say two things. First of all, I would 100% loved watching you over the last 6 months, because we kind of got together at the beginning of lockdown. I think we were all together, swapping messages about the podcast thing, and I kept my
I'm not sure if I should do it or not. I'm thinking, I don't know if I should invest in this. That was the conversation.
But you did, right? And you went online, and I thought fair play to him. He's actually going for it, and I sort of looked at that and thought to myself, maybe I should be doing the same as well. Maybe not, I don't know. But fair play to you, you've done that, and you're seeing the results of that transition, if you like, into the online space, and you're seeing a lot of social proof coming back and business as a result of it. The only way I think that you help people make that decision is you take them through that conversation, which is, well, look, what happens if you don't, and what happens if you do? Back to basic fundamental selling, Simon, yeah?
Yeah. Can
you afford to do nothing and stay where you are? Well, yeah, I can. Okay, what happens if you stay where you are and the rest of the market and your competition move and you don't? Does that be good? Is that be good for you, or will that be bad for you? I think the honest answer to that would be, well, if everyone's going over there and we're not, we're either going to get really, really lucky or we're going to look stupid. Okay, but let's say you went over there. What could you do? It's the usual stuff. And I think, people buy for their reasons, not yours. Okay, well, let's build that case, which is reasonable enough for them to want to go ahead and do it. I don't know if that answers the question, but the only way I can answer it is by saying you've got to go and try and show them that return on investment and crunch some numbers.
You do. A man called Bill Tilsley was a client of mine, but a man that I learned a lot from. He said, Simon, there's only so much of the broom handle you can cut off before you stop the man sweeping. It's just a great one that we've used lots selling. And Matt, I've really, really enjoyed this. Now, listen, people need to go and listen to your podcast, okay? Because there's some great stuff in it. How do people find your podcast?
So they can go at the usual places. They can go to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. They can go to Spotify. They can go to Spreaker. I'd point out episode, I think it's 401, which is with a gentleman called Simon Bowkett. but yeah, so the Sales Cadence podcast at most podcast retailers would be the first place I would send people.
Perfect. Okay. And getting hold of you, social media you mentioned before, what's the easiest way to get hold of you and follow you?
Yeah, often on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Matt Sykes. The website is salescadence.co.uk. And if you are interested in reading the book's called Converted, How to Help More People Buy What You Sell. Obviously, you can get that at Amazon.
Perfect. Matt, that just leaves me to say thank you very much for your time.
So I've loved every minute of it, and thank you so much for getting me involved.
Thanks. That just leaves me to say that all details of this episode and other episodes on the selling in the motor trade can be found on our website, simcotraining.co.uk. Go there to get a copy of our book, Words That Sell Cars. Go there to sign up to a free trial of our Sales Fitness online sales training program. Easiest way to get hold of me is Simon Bowkett through LinkedIn. Thank you.